50 time, and just wanted to bring that up so that you know when you want to do your break.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we're running a little behind on time, so we're gonna go through the break. And if there's time towards the end of this session, we will take a break then. So yeah, let me dive right in. First, my name is Martin Morales, Operator Training and Certification Unit, and I'll be discussing operator duties and ethics. So let's jump right in. So here are the topics that we will talk about, which include the items listed on here. And we touched bases on most of these during the other sessions, but we'll kind of go a little bit on an overview. So one thing I want to emphasize are standard operating procedures. More and more, we are requesting that systems start documenting daily tasks through SOPs. And SOPs can be written for just about any procedure that an operator performs on a daily basis. These can be backwashing, sampling, lab testing, etc. So and if you're a plant that, does not operate, for example, if you're a plant that does not operate 24/7, maybe have an SOP for the startup and shutdown of, or how to perform a filter backwash, just as an example. And having SOPs written out can help with training purposes or identifying mistakes in the process. So very, very helpful. Operational monitoring, it's an important part of an operator's daily activities, and it can come in a variety of ways. One way is the operational monitoring data that needs to be recorded, such as the chlorination dosages, fluoridation dosages, flow rates, etc. But another way are things that are not being recorded, such as the visual inspections. Are operators getting in and looking routinely at the flock basin to see that your flock formation, what that kind of looks like? If you have clarifiers, are you observing the sludge blankets, and are you observing the filter backwash process, which usually there can be a lot of issues that arise from that. So overall, I mean, are you aware of the sounds, vibration, and heat in the plant? So if you're aware of the normal state of your equipment day to day, it's easy to kind of pick up on something that's wrong. So if you're walking into your plant and by touch, or you feel a piece of equipment that's emitting a lot of heat, that something is wrong. Overall, you guys are the operators that are there day to day, and you know your equipment in and out. You know how it should be functioning, how it should be sounding. It's kind of similar to if you're at your house and your furnace sounds a little funky. You're familiar with that, and it's you want the same familiarity with your water system. So monitoring sensors and SCADA readings that monitor turbidity, chlorine, system pressure, etc., are all parts of the operational monitoring, and all of these fall into that same category. So all of these things that involve collecting routine samples in your plant for analysis and or measuring the chemical feed used um, are referred, a lot of these are referred to in the plant as doing the rounds, right? So these can include, collecting samples, chlorine, fluoride, pH, phosphate turbidity, um, the measured chemical feeds, the chemical scale, if you're reading how much chemical is being consumed off of scale throughout a certain amount of time, and the level readings, your plant flow readings, all these. Um, so collecting these samples are extremely important in the way that if you all of a sudden see a sample analysis that's way off from what you normally observe, then that could potentially raise a red flag, and would require further investigation. So as an example, if you're taking a chlorine residual at a certain point in your plant and all of a sudden you see no residual, questions should be asked, and investigations should be taken by the operator, right? So this table that comes from the suggested practices document that Eagle has had for decades. It can be found on our website under the community water supply, and we'll go through the locations of some of these documents on our website. This specific one is for the complete treatment, but we do have similar tables for the limited treatment facilities, if you're a system that is using groundwater with no influence of surface water. Um, so what this is intended to be is a guidance to what samples should be collected during normal operations and at what frequency. Of course, this isn't set in stone, but if we get questions on how often to sample during operational monitoring, then this is our go-to document. Again, this is for operation monitoring and not for compliance monitoring samples. So you would collect with the compliance ones, you would collect in a bottle and send to a laboratory. This is not that. This is a process control monitoring. So this is a good starting point, but there are instances where we can justify varying from this table with more or less monitoring, and this would be discussed with your engineer kind of as the monitoring progresses. So but again, it is a good starting point and is available on our website if you are interested. And I will add we'll go through in this presentation kind of where those are located, just so that the operators are aware of all the forms that we have and the locations. So interpreting results. So an important part of monitoring is interpretation of results, right? Treatment plants often do a great job at gathering large amounts of data, but the effort is kind of wasted if it's not reviewed, right? And a certain data trend should guide you towards your treatment decisions. Um, so here's a list of these examples. If some of these include increased chlorine demand, increased raw turbidity, changes in pH, low chlorine residual, taste and odor detection, shift in temperature, increased TMP, reduced filter hours, run hours. So as we think about these changes, we can kind of start to determine the cause of them. Some of these can be, a short-term temporary adjustment, or, other data may not be as obvious. So we have been observing, and for example, like we have been observing an upward trend in pH in the Great Lakes over the course of years. So looking at the data collected will allow you to kind of see what's going on and use it to your advantage as far as treatment decisions. Another example is, if you're a membrane filtration system, right? And with respect to time, you're seeing that transmembrane pressure increase. You want to be recording this data and observing it, because the more a filter is in use, you start seeing an increase in TMP, and you can directly relate that to when you need to switch out some of those modules or cartridges, right? So So in this course, we've had many examples of calculating dosages such as chlorine, fluoride, and alum, right? So this is a basic skill that all water treatment plant operators need to know for each of the chemicals that they feed. Dosages can be, expressed in terms of ions, as we've seen from the alum section, right? And it could also be expressed in terms of product. And usually Eagle will indicate how they want this presented on the monthly operation reports, right? But just just kind of an overview of what can be what has to be reported in what way. And this is not a poll question. This is just basically a question that we like to kind of go through. So who is primarily responsible for calculating the chemical dosages at your plant? And hopefully everyone in operations can perform these chemical dosages, but oftentimes it's the operator in charge who is responsible for submitting the monthly operation reports to Eagle. So, it falls heavily on them to perform these chemical dosages properly. And but we kind of want to emphasize that any operator who's licensed should be able to perform these calculations and be confident in doing so. So a little bit on filter backwashing. So filter backwashing in terms of an operator's role requires specific attention. We did just have a presentation on filters, so some of this will be a little bit of an overlap. So let's kind of go through this quickly. So the operator's role is to routinely clean the filter media, and this is usually based on runtime, head loss, or individual filter effluent turbidity, right? So these parameters would indicate the need for a filter backwash. So what we want to emphasize in this presentation is the need for operators to be present at the filter. And we're not talking about the membrane filtration filters. We're talking about our conventional filtration systems, right? Even if the process for filter backwash runs itself automatically, it's still important and to be present, and here are some reasons why. So many filters have surface wash arms that should be rotating around and spraying the top of the filter media at the beginning of the filter backwash cycle. And this function is critical because if it's not working for a long period of time, it could start getting mud ball formation, and really run into some problems with your filter media. So during backwash, operators should be checking to see if they are functioning properly. Similarly, with air washing, you should be observing the functionality of this equipment. Air must be functioning properly and have an even distribution between your air and your water throughout the filter. And so, depending on the season and what's going on with the raw water quality, um, also, coagulation dosages, hours of the filter, all these factors will have an impact on how long and the duration of the filter backwash. For example, like if it's an automatic backwash that is going to wash for say 20 minutes or something, um, and if you don't have an operator present, you would have difficulty assessing if the filter is clean, because if it still looks like this picture here on the slide after 20 minutes, then the filter still needs to be washed, because it's not running clear yet. So we've had a few extreme cases of filter under drain failures, and when that happens, you have some turbulent boiling media and backwashing water. And again, if you don't have someone present, you'll be you'll not be able to detect that. And filter walls often need to be sprayed down during the backwashes, so you need an operator in there for that. The impact to adjust filters depending on the hydraulics of your plant and how many filters are in service. It's also a good idea to look at your adjacent filters to see if by backwashing, for example, one filter, if you're having negative effects on or negative impacts on other filters. So for these systems that have filter to waste, it's important to see through the whole process, properly. So um, as far as record keeping goes, this is an important part of what operators do day to day. But let's go through this one kind of quickly here. So I want to point out that disinfection profiling and benchmarking are federal surface water treatment rule requirements that and the requirement has to do with recording all parameters related to disinfection and CT process. So things such as reservoir level, disinfectant residual pH temperature, plant flow. So these kind of parameters must be recorded to meet that rule. Also, Part 15 of the Michigan Safe Drinking Water Act has some specific record retention requirements that operators need to be familiar with. And when Eagle comes out to do the sanitary surveys, they will ask for the records and of instrument calibration, verifications, cleaning and maintenance, and stuff like this. So we sometimes run into issues where the operator's renewal slip slips through kind of the cracks, and now the system doesn't have an operator in charge. So the operator and the manager should be both aware of the operator's CEC requirements to renew, which can be found on the operator training and certification website. Also, the system should fill and submit to their district engineer a backup operator designation form detailing the plan for the operation if the operator in charge is, at some point not available. So, and another good skill for operators to have is the ability to effectively communicate, right? You want communication between between your operators, between operators in the plant and the distribution system. So Effective communication can avoid major issues both within the water treatment plant and out in the distribution. If your plant has good communication with the distribution system, you can kind of work together to solve issues that may arise in the process, right? Effective communication is sending and receiving information both internally, externally, such as to and from Eagle employees, right? So, responding to emails and meeting in a timely manner. Good communication, shift to shift, can really make a big difference in the water quality if everyone, knows what's going on and where the plant stands. So communication between the system and the public is also good to keep your citizens informed of their water quality, right? So another good part here is customer service. So this is another good part of the operator's job is for customer service. You want to provide good quality water. You want to respond to complaints, breaks in a timely manner. You want to be respectful and empathetic in case you kind of get some customers some out there kind of asking you questions. Quality of customer service can help and hinder the relationship between the public. Um, and training sometimes provided by a WWA, Michigan Rural Water Authority. You can point some of your customers to kind of run down through some of these websites, and if you're a big enough system, do you have someone that who works with the public and or the media, right? Also a good communication person between um, the plant and the customers. So another big part of the operator's job is looking at weather forecasting, and by looking at weather and some temperature, water levels, seasonal conditions, you can kind of forecast what you need to do with your treatment and your water production. So with maintenance tasks, every plant will be different in terms of maintenance, but this is just kind of an overview. A major part of the operator's job is to kind of keep up to date on maintenance schedules on mechanical equipment such as pumps, motors, mixers, traveling screens, etc. And the operator should make sure that they are up to date on inspections of basin, storage tanks, pumps, filters, all that kind of stuff. Residual handling systems, coating and repainting, calibration, verification of lab equipment, all have certain maintenance schedules that should be performed by the operator. So here we're going to dive into where some of these are located. So here, if you visit www.michigan.gov/eagle and you go on to divisions and offices and you click on drinking water and environmental health, you'll come to this homepage here, right? You want to click on the community water supply that's indicated by the arrow right there. Actually, let me right here, community water supply. And once you click in here, you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a couple of tabs. So here's where that suggested practices for waterworks is located. You also see a link to the 10 state standards, right? And then when you click on the left-hand side here, reporting forms, these are all the forms that operators are submitting. Well, not all, but some of the forms that operators are submitting to Eagle. You got your annual pumpage and usage reports. You've got your cross-connection report, drinking water emergency report, your emergency response plan. So all these kind of templates here are located right on our website. You can download their PDF downloadable, right? So for annual reports, for reporting, there are different reports that are required. So let's start with the annual report. All community water supplies and, some non-community water supplies have to submit an annual consumer confidence report that will detail the detection you have had in the, last calendar year, along with some other important parameters. So there is also the annual cross-connection report that overviews your cross-connection prevention efforts for the year. And both of these reports are reviewed by Eagle, so you'll definitely hear from us if there's an issue with the report. And there may be other special reports that Eagle requests depending on your system's specifications, right? And we do have a relatively recent new report called the annual lead service line replacement report. So if your system has lead service lines or galvanized lines that were previously connected to lead, you will have to yearly remove 10 or 7% of the initial number of lead service lines in your distribution system. So um, this now has to be reported, right? And this link in the presentation will give you the PDF form of that report. So, and there are also some other non-regulation or regulatory reports that get submitted to the state, and these are the lost and unaccounted for water, main break locations and frequency, water system finances, revenues, etc. Stuff like this. So, depending on the system, you'd want to check with your district engineer for that. So as far as monthly operation report content, so this itself can take a whole hour. So in this presentation, we'll quickly go kind of like an overview on the different components of the monthly operation report. But like I said, this in itself can be a whole presentation by itself. So with the cover page, so one of the main things we are looking for is, has the operator in charge reviewed this report? Has it been signed? And is it being emailed to us by the operator in charge? And it's our expectation that you as the operator in charge should be reviewing every aspect of the monthly operation report. And reviewing these monthly, MORs are part of the responsibility of the operator in charge, and should be reviewed for errors. For example, like if we have a fluoride level that's reported as at 25 milligrams per liter, then it's kind of obvious that someone did not review the document before submitting it to Eagle. So, and of course, we're all human and make mistakes, but when it comes to these reports, if you want to have someone kind of give it a good look over, extra set of eyes. So at the bottom of the cover page, we have a remark section, and if you have any questions about data collecting, any violations or issues or problems, please feel free to add them to the remarks section to kind of keep us in the loop on what's going on with your system. And if the remark section is, it's not enough room for the explanation, please attach a new page. We highly encourage operators to leave remarks about any system discrepancies. So please feel free. So let's take a look at the bottom section of the cover page. This is one of the most common sources of violations that we issue where things are not properly reported. So the first part we have filter confluence, and this is actual compliance based on the samples that you have taken on your confluent. So this is where we want your data your data reported so we can use that for compliance verifications. And in the second part, you are required to have individual filter effluent turbidimeters and then reported to us. So please note that this section, does not apply for membrane filtration. Again, it's for conventional filtration systems. And if you have any of these conditions, it's not a violation, but it's, it kind of triggers further action. So before you write no for any of these line items each month, you need to verify your individual filter effluent records. So um, occasionally, we have instances where we uncover some filter effluent exceedances that, may not be noted on the cover sheet of the MOR. So please, make sure your reference records, make sure you note your reference records when this is being filled out each month. And in the third part, we have a few questions on CT, and the same thing with this. Please make sure you refer to your records when you're filling this out. So this this requires awareness of, what conditions you need to be able to, to meet your CT. And lastly, the two last questions are, if you have any online equipment that requires um that's required, that we're offline for the month, please, again, please do not autofill these. It's usually the tendency to to save every time, and that's where, operators run into problems. If you have these on autofill, you really want to be making sure that it's accurate to what your system currently is at. So please do not autofill. So conventional or direct filtration plants are always going to have this page, and that talks about the coagulation dosages, the raw water applied, the filter confluence uh, to turbidity. So if there is a problem with the format or content of your MORs, we will communicate by our sanitary survey process, or sometimes outside of that, we get these corrected. So this is generally what it kind of looks like for this part of the report, just kind of a general view of what you'll be reporting to Eagle. And again, so we cover this in other treatment one sessions. Um, but if you change coagulant, as an example, please make sure that you double check the formulas you're using to calculate the results. And if you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out to Eagle staff, to correct that um, in your MORs. For your chemical feed, you have the majority of the time fluoride and chlorine, right? Sometimes you have other chemicals such as phosphate, polymer, lime, and there will be additional pages for that as well. And again, per suggested practices document that we talked about, um, for fluoride applications, you have recommendations of raw water sampling on a monthly basis, plant tap sampling on a daily basis, and distribution sampling on a weekly basis. But again, it's not set in stone and can definitely change per the discussion with your Eagle engineer. And a fluoride monthly average of 2 milligrams per liter may require a public notice, and anything over 4 milligrams per liter, of course, is a violation. Let's see, water chemistry. So with water chemistry, it's an important part of the MORs, especially for plants who do lime softening that monitor parameters such as hardness, alkalinity, chlorine, pH. And water systems are also encouraged to do some of these corrosion control indices, such as the Langmuir index, the chlorine sulfate mass ratio, to help with corrosion control optimization, right? So if you're a designated corrosion control water plant, you may also have set water quality parameter ranges that Eagle requires you to meet, which would be part of the reporting as well, right? Here for biological and physical parameters. So every plant is different, especially in surface water plants. So each MOR is kind of a customized document for each system. So this is all kind of general information. Well, so with that said, we also have MOR pages that deal with bacteriological parameters, right? So these parameters include some of these are like total coliform. You have your taste, you have your odor, so this is just kind of the layout format as to kind of what to expect if you're reporting these. And not all plant do this, but we encourage everyone to, especially if your source water is more vulnerable to algae, taste and odor, then that should be reported on your reports to Eagle, right? So remember that when you get your BAC-T samples, you need to collect your chlorine residual with it as well. And that data is what we use to calculate your running annual average for meeting the maximum residual disinfectant levels, right? Missing this would be a potential monitoring violation. And there is a variety of different distribution system monitoring that may occur that need to, also be reported on your MORs. So, with that said, we will dive into the ethics part of the presentation.
Hey, Martin,
Yeah.
just want to chime in here for a moment. We're a little more than halfway through with this. I just wanted to make sure we run that second poll question.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Matt.
All right. All right, we've got a true false question up here. And just want you to take a moment. If you're looking to get continuing ed credits, then you do need to answer this poll question. And the question is a statement, true, false. An operator may remain the operator in charge if they let their certification expire. So you can take a moment to answer that. All right, only up to 81%. So we may have had some people step away from the screen. All right, I'm going to let this run another 15 seconds. We did stall out at 81%. And I'm just going to go ahead and close this poll. And Martin, we have the majority answering that is false. An operator may not remain in charge if they let their certification expire.
Correct. Yep. So if your certification expired, you are no longer considered the operator in charge. That is correct. So it's false. An operator, cannot remain the OIC if their certification has expired. So thanks, Matt.
All right, thank you.
All right, everyone. So
Jamie?
yeah, let us go on to the next section here. So the ethics for operators. So let's jump right in. So what does it mean to be ethical? We as a group can define what we believe is ethical behavior, and we use these as our governing principles. So meaning that we have a set of moral principles that we live by day to day. And ethical practice in the water industry, it may be honesty, it may be trustworthy, cautious, on time. It may be many more. Um, so why are operators certified? So we are certified to protect the public health. Our certification provides a kind of a base knowledge, which serves as a trust that we are operating these systems the right way, taking the correct sampling, reporting problems, etc. And we want to ensure that qualified people are, operating these water treatment plants and distribution systems, right? So it is a water operators responsibility to assure that the distribution system and all, their complete water treatment system, their limited treatment system, all that is adequately maintained, and all customers have a safe and continuous water supply, right? So the system must be operated in a manner that protects the financial investment, and it must be operated and operate by an operator who is committed to the system, has good problem solving skills, organization skills, communication skills, and above all, the operator must understand the system. That's a big component. You must understand your equipment. You must understand the process, and this all leads to public health protection. So what we should be doing on a daily basis is continuously looking for problems in our system, making sure that inspections slash maintenance are, up to date, and not waiting until, something fails or goes wrong, to do so. So, we have to be, actively looking for permanent solutions and not temporary solutions to problems. And you really want to be active in your system, looking, checking, seeing, what's wrong, making proposals for upgrading certain parts that are failing or need maintenance, right? And all this leads to the protection of public health. So this article, which is taken from the New England Waterworks Association, let's kind of dictates a little bit on the professional code of ethics for water system operators. Let's take a look at a couple of these. So at all times, recognize the primary obligation to protect the safety, health, and welfare of the public during the performance of duties, right? Of course, you want to make sure that, your customers are drinking healthy water, right? Accept and perform direct accept and perform direct supervision of water operation assignments only in the specific technical and level of operations where qualified by education and experience. So this does not include circumstances of work performed under the direct supervision of licensed qualified coworkers, consultants, or employees. So what does this mean? So this means that you want to be working and you want to be doing work that you're qualified for. You're right. You're not gonna be a water operator and then handling electrical issues or electrical stuff when it's outside your range of knowledge, right? You want to accept um, projects that you're knowledgeable about, right? And if it's something that you don't know, reach out, ask questions, get contractors to perform the work that they're knowledgeable on, right? Let's see. The next one, be completely objective and truthful in all professional reports, statements, or testimonies. The operator shall include all relevant and pertinent information in such reports, statements, and testimonies, right? So you want, with this, you want to be as truthful as possible in your applications, in your statements, and what you're reporting to Eagle, right? Not falsify academic or professional qualifications, not misrepresent or exaggerate the degree of responsibility in prior assignments, duties, or accomplishments to enhance his or her qualifications with work. So a lot of this we see in the application process when you're applying for your exams. We don't want any falsifications of any records, or say you have a master's degree when you don't, or say you worked at a certain location when you haven't, right? And the last one here, so present information to the adequate regulatory agency in writing if the water system operator has knowledge or reason to believe that another licensed water operator may be in violation of this code, and shall cooperate with the regulatory agency in furnishing information or assistance as may be required by the agency. So with this, if you see any operators that are falsifying or performing any tasks that can be detrimental to the water system, please report them to Eagle. It's very, 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 very important that anything that's observed as wrongdoing be reported for the safety of the public, right? So so these let's see, ethical violations. So two main categories. You got misrepresentation and falsification, right? So these categories, they apply to work you do at the plant, as well as how you represent yourself to Eagle for clarification, for certification tasks, right? So with these, let's look at first the misrepresentation, right? So for example, on sampling collection, it's been the case where misrepresentation occurred in sample collection. Um, like say, for example, you're taking a back tea. We've seen instances where, operators add chlorine, they microwave the sample to destroy some of those organisms, even sample at different locations or even dilute the sample. So in the area, so for that, misrepresentation of the data, that's a big no-no. And in the area of certification, we've had instances where operators, um, submit educational diplomas that they actually do not hold. So again, misrepresentation of your education for sure. As far as so for ethical violations for the falsification aspect of it, now this is a different situation. This is just completely straight up lying. You're putting down data that was not actually sampled. You're reporting fake data. Um, Same thing with falsification of an application, operator certification, or falsified CEC slips. And we've seen a range of everything, and it never ends well if if and when you are caught. So so Eagle does not like going through this process of revoking or suspending, or probation period for certified operators, but in some cases it is definitely required and has happened in the past. So if a certificate is revoked, you cannot reapply for 5 years. The whole process is pretty ugly, and you have to go in front of a series of board members. There's fines associated with the process, and upon a criminal investigation, there's also a potential that you'll do jail time if whatever they find is deemed to be severe. So please um, make sure you're taking this into consideration. So let's dive into a little bit on case studies on falsification of information in application. So a Michigan city was having some issues getting a certified S2 operator. So the local firefighter, trying to help, applied for and passed the S2. And after the fact, the operator reported to Eagle that that the firefighter they had no experience in the water field, and should not have been allowed to take the exam. Well, with Eagle measures, Eagle revoked his license and he was fired. So please, no falsification of any documentation. And even if the fact, you pass, even with that knowledge that records were falsified, you can still and will get your license revoked and be fired. So as far as for fraudulent reporting, um, we have had situations in the past where years of MORs have been falsified, along with lead and copper report forms, that had been frequently falsified. So, you are ultimately responsible for the documents that you and forms that you are signing. So everything you submit is associated with your name, right? You got to keep that in the back of your head. We highly encourage you to do internal reviews on or have extra set of eyes on documents before submitting them to Eagle, which could potentially help minimize these mistakes. But yeah, so when there is a repeated pattern, this is, when flags are raised, we start seeing the same reoccurrence of patterns or same crossing out of samples on your MORs, and that's when we start looking a little more closely, right? So even if it's unintentional, falsifying a form is still a form of fraud and an ethical violation that can lead to the suspension or even the revocation of your certificate, or it can also have other consequences, right? So we are here to help you if you have any questions about how to fill out forms, what's missing, what's not missing, um, questions like that. So with this one, fraudulent surface water MORs. So for those of you who also work in the surface water treatment plant, you should fill out and answer these questions every month. So please don't pre or autofill these questions, and really take the time to read through them every month to make sure that you're correctly reporting um, an accurate representation of your system, right? Since, things could be changing from time to time, right? Um, so up right here above, these are some questions from the surface water MOR that are answered each month, and related to turbidity and chlorine in instrumentation readings, right? So these questions should be reviewed again every month by the operator in charge, and because they must be reported accurately depending on the month of operation. So please, no autofilling again to emphasize. So here's fraudulent lead and copper reporting. So sometimes we get a submittal of crossed out areas and resample nodes. And again, please take the time to write a full explanation of what's going on or what happened, the problems you're encountering with the samples, and this that will really help us make the decision with the regulatory compliance. So, and we can see that here on this report here on about line 10 down. So now let's dive right into a case study. So most of you have probably read about this, but this case is going back to about 2017. This one happened in Ohio, in which a water operator was caught falsifying certificates of trainees. Overall, 26 employees of the Youngstown Water Department, they pleaded guilty to falsifying their contact hours, and they were ordered to pay restitution, fines, and to complete community service. But certified water operators, their licenses were also suspended for I believe like 2 years. So some operators were also demoted. For this specific operator, there were 6 counts against this operator, 2 counts of forgery, 2 counts of criminal noncompliance with the Water Act, 2 counts of tempering with records. So it can really come back and affect you if you're not playing by the rules and being truthful in the work that you are performing, right? So, and with this one, one of the worst cases, at least in recent times, this happened in Lenawi County, and this operator, no longer operates at the water system, but this system was reporting hardness and iron. But when Eagle went on site, there was no sign of any test kits at the facility. When the operator was asked to perform a chlorine test, um, they were completely unfamiliar with how to do so. Um, chlorine, chlorine, in fact, um, had been turned off, and yet they were still reporting the chlorine residuals on the report. The iron filters had not been backwashed regularly, if at all, for some time, maybe years. And Eagle really came down on them with the full force of the rules, because it's public health that's at stake here, and the public health was at jeopardy the whole time the operator was in charge. Um, so with that said, there are some lessons and takeaways. So the home takeaway today is, always be involved in the water industry. Read new articles on new technology and see how it can play or how it can be applied to your system, right? Also, it's very helpful to read about past enforcement cases or detrimental system problems, and you can always ask yourself, could it ever happen to my system? Take measures to always improve operations for your system, and don't be afraid to create a proposal for new equipment and present it to your board. Many times operators are afraid to ask for new things or maintenance because of cost, but if you present your case well and show the cause and effect of not doing something for your system, you have some power to convince some people. Um, Always document everything and be always on the lookout for potential problems, and and don't push off things for later, and see what happens. Be proactive, be always looking, be always checking, asking questions, communicate with Eagle if there are any questions. We're always here to help. So with that said, thank you so much for taking the time. I will hand it off to Bert